Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Bradley Hallman. This is another tip technique video. We're going to go over one of my very favorites, one that I've used for many years. This is a staple that goes from coast to coast across the country, from Florida to New York, and back even to Oklahoma. Pre-spawn, summer, fall, winter. Now that LiveScope's out, it is 24/7. The old jerkbait. So we're going to talk about my jerkbait setup, where I use it, how I like to use it, what I'm looking for, line setup, rod setup, reel setup. We're going to cover it all. So don't go anywhere. We're going to cover it in this video right here. Hey, if it's your first time here, don't forget, bump that like, hit that subscribe, and touch that notification bell to let you know when my next video is coming out. You can follow along. So guys, let's get to it, the jerkbait. All right, fellas, the jerkbait. And as you can see, this old Abu Garcia that I've had for 15 years, I'm still throwing it on. It's been a good one. The old Revo STX. It's held up for a long time. My main setup, let's talk about generals here, because we can get pretty deep in the jerkbait, especially when we start talking about LiveScope. There's going to be a lot of different setups and presentations that may change quite a bit, especially times of year and exactly what I'm looking for. But let's just talk about the general overall starting off jerkbait setup for me. This is a 7-to-1 gear ratio reel. I still like a high-speed setup. The one thing that you're really going to notice with me and a jerkbait is I like a shorter rod. And I've heard through all the years about, well, you should have a rod that's built to your height and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm 6'4", and I can tell you, I do not like jerking with a 7'3" rod. Don't like it. One, it moves the bait too far. A shorter rod doesn't take up as much slack whenever I hit that twitch to it as a short rod does. And a lot of times, especially right now when I'm filming this, is pre-spawn, early spring, I want a slower reaction time and a shorter distance on each twitch. So a short rod is a big deal to me. This is the Falcon 5 power 168. So it's a 5-168. So any of you guys have been following me, 5 power, pretty limber rod for Falcon. 6'8" is all this rod is. So it's a pretty short rod. Probably the shortest rod that I carry is my jerkbait rod. Line, this is be thrown on 12-pound test. Generally I'm going as light as possible because it gives me more depth. Sometimes I'll even go down to 10 and sometimes even lighter, but 12 is probably my parameter where I stay all the time. This is 12-pound test Sunline, FCS Sniper. Once again, it's a winding bait for me. Sniper casts really well for fluorocarbon, comes off the spool really smooth, doesn't have a lot of memory. This is the line that I'm going to throw probably 80% of the time. There are times when I get into some heavier brush pile type fishing where I'm jerking around brush piles and stuff that I might go to a little bit heavier line, or if I'm in a tree situation where there's a lot of timber, standing timber and things like that, I might possibly bump it up to 14. But probably never going higher than that on a jerkbait. I would say 14 down to 10 is my prime range, with 12 being my overall all-around go-to line. This jerkbait right here is actually one of the best jerkbaits ever designed. A lot of guys throwing the Mega Bass right now. We'll pull my jerkbait boxes out here in just a second. But this is actually the Spro McStick. It was designed by Mike McClellan, who quite frankly is one of the best jerkbait fishermen to ever walk the planet. He designed this bait for Spro years ago. It's weighted well, it casts well, which is really important to me. That was one of the problems with the old Rogues and stuff was that they just didn't weigh enough and they didn't cast very well. This has the weight transfer system in it. It casts really well. It's got a good rattle in it. It's a good overall bait. I would say that I probably do 75% of my fishing with this. For me, it's easy to use the Spro, not just because I work with the company Spro, but because everyone is throwing the Mega Bass and it gives them a different look. Those fish, a lot of the high pressure places that we go to, have seen so many dadgum jerkbaits. I just want to give them something that's got a little bit different action. It's a little bit slower side to side, a little more subtle, not as quick of a twitch that the Mega Bass is. Especially in the pre-spawn, when I'm looking at cold water fish, I want something that is a little bit more subtle. It can make a difference on how many bites I get. Now, I definitely am not saying that I never throw the Mega Bass, because I do. I've got plenty of them, especially the +1. I like it because it gets down a little bit deeper, and we'll get into that here in a second. But the jerkbait to me is an all-around fish catcher. some of the guys like Van Dam probably had it figured out years ago that they catch them year round. And if you're guilty like me, being from the part of the country that I am in the Ozarks, Oklahoma, Table Rock, this was a big pre-spawn type bait. And what we've learned through the years is that it plays all year long. If you have clear water and visibility, this thing right here is a fish catcher. It's a big player down in Florida early in the spring. It's a big player up north in the summertime. So jerkbait fishing is a big player year round all across the country. Let's get into what my tackle boxes look like. All right, guys, this is pretty much what my jerkbait boxes look like. I've got a million more jerkbaits, but I finally just had to get it down to where I had a couple boxes that I knew it was things that I would throw in the limited amount of time that I have traveling around the country trying to find fish, catch fish, blah, blah, blah. The things that matter to me most are that I have different depths of jerkbaits. This is a McStick 85. You can see it's got a longer bill on it. I've got some with color, some that are translucent, some that are a little more white in color than the McStick 85. And then I have, you know, the True Blues, which have always been great. These are regular standard McSticks, along with all of my Mega Bass, $35 jerkbaits or whatever they are. Hey, I'll tell y'all something. I saw Crete made a post about his Mega Basses and how all the backs had swelled up from being out in the heat. And actually, I agree with him because I've thrown an entire box like this away before where they've swelled. I'm looking to see if I can find one in here, and I don't see one right now. I may have gotten rid of all of them, but they will. If you leave these things out in the heat in the summertime, the backs will actually swell and get a hump in them. And I think that it's the plastic that they're using in Japan is a little bit different than some of the plastics that we have with some of the manufacturers here in the US. And I think that's what's causing it. But he actually got a lot of feedback, people saying, well, you know, how could that happen? It didn't happen. Well, I'm here to tell you, it does happen. If you look at that one really close, you can tell that it started to swell. You can see how the belly's really big right there. It's starting to do it, but they'll swell completely to a bubble and crack down the middle, and I've had an entire box of these things do it. And it is from being left out in the heat in the summertime. And I know in Oklahoma it gets to be 103 degrees outside, and you've got these things sitting out in a tackle box. This is an old pointer, Lucky Craft, deep diver. One of my favorite go-tos. We actually had this one right here. I'll never forget this one. This is a great bait. And there's another one buried down there. The SP90. This color was actually called Crack, and it was a big player here in Oklahoma. A little stained water pre-spawn. Caught a lot of fish on that years ago. That pretty much covers all the different jerkbaits that I throw because it'll cover about every depth. Like I said, depth is what's going to matter to me the most. Now with the advent of LiveScope, I can actually see and wear and tell exactly how deep I'm going. Some of the tricks that I do, and I think I had one laying in here. Some of the tricks that I do now, where is that sucker at? I had it. I know it's laying in here. Ooh, there it is. I'll do things like that right there. And what I'm actually doing is I'm wrapping the bottom of the hooks with a little bit of lead, make that thing sit like that, and it actually will sink a little bit as it sits. Instead of staying suspended in the water column, I'm actually making that thing fall just a little. About that speed right there is about all I want. And what that's allowing me to do is it's allowing me to fish jerkbaits in 15, 18 feet of water. Fish that I see on LiveScope that I just can't quite get down there and get their attention, put a little bit of weight on it, count it down, and it'll sink, 6 inches a second. So we're not talking about very much time, and then I'm down there on top of that fish and able to present this bait right over top of them, no matter how deep they get. This is a +1 with a little bit of weight on it. It's a little trick that I'm doing. All that is just a little bit of lead, solder wire, and it doesn't take much weight at all to get one of these things to advent to where it's no longer perfectly suspending but actually sinking a little bit. That's a little trick that I'm using quite a bit. Presentation with the jerkbait goes back to that 6/8 rod. Probably the most important thing, if you haven't thrown a jerkbait very much, is that you want to make sure that when you're twitching, every time you twitch, you throw back. So your wrist should be in and then back. And what that back action is doing is you're actually throwing slack back at that bait. And that's what gives it that ability, almost like walking a dog with a spook. So you always want to make sure that when you're twitching, that every time you twitch, your rod is going right back so that you're throwing slack back at that bait in between every single twitch. Cadences matter. Sometimes they like it fast, sometimes they like it slow. A lot of that has to do with LiveScope. I'm really just kind of watching the body language of the bass. It's almost like sight fishing. So like, if I get it out there and I get it over top of a bass and I'm going slow and he's not paying attention to it, I may twitch it a couple times really fast just to see if I can get him to look at it. And then from that point on, however that fish acts, if he wants to go fast, then I go fast. If he wants to go slow, then I go slow. So if I twitch a couple times, he doesn't move, then I'm just going to let it sit. And then sometimes it may sit there for 30 seconds over his head, literally, and he hasn't moved. And then 35 seconds passes and I see him kind of turn and look. And then he may swim up real slow. And if he does that, then I'm just giving it one little short. And as he moves up slow, gets closer, maybe one just little light twitch. And then if he starts to move a little faster, then I may twitch a little faster. So I just kind of mimic the speed of what the fish is doing. If the fish is going fast, then I'm going to go fast. If the fish is going slow, then I'm going to go slow. Those are some of the ways that I'm using jerkbaits on LiveScope right now today. It is a great presentation to be able to use LiveScoping because it allows you to hold a bait over the top of a fish longer than we can keep any other bait there. It's the one and only bait that I can think of that I use that's not just a reel over the top or reel by them and they don't react. This bait you can literally tease them with. Put it in front of them and leave it there. You can weight it, change the different action of the weight so that it sinks to get to deeper fish. You can change hooks and make it lighter so that it floats a little bit. Lots of different things that you can do. Just really paying attention to how the fish's behavior is on LiveScope to how they are. Summertime brush pile fishing, something that we had never attacked with. You know, we'd either crank them, throw worms, jigs, all these things. Now we can go at them with LiveScope and a jerkbait. And it is amazing the fish that we can pull out of a brush pile with a jerkbait. You take it, suspend it right above the pile, and all of a sudden these fish start showing up that you didn't even see because they were stuck down in that pile, and they'll rise up and really, really investigate that bait. So jerkbait's a really, really cool bait. That pretty much covers all of the aspects and ratios of which I use it. Smallmouth fishing up north, love it up there as well. It's usually about speed there. The faster, the more they like it, but it's open water live scoping as well. So the jerkbait 101. That pretty much covers it for me. Rod, line, reel, guys. Appreciate every one of y'all following along. Don't forget, bump that like, hit that subscribe, and until next time, I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.